Hello and welcome to my talk from x86 to ARM. What changes when architecture changes? Something about me, myself. I am an independent security researcher. My name is Himanshu. I am a conference speaker, as well as I speak at local information security meetups, including Null, OASP, and other meetups which happen regularly and irregularly. Along with that, I am an information security instructor. I have been delivering trainings and teaching people on the topics such as malware analysis, exploit development, reverse engineering for a few years now. I am primarily interested in exploit development, malware analysis, rootkits, reverse engineering, and anything which is related to low level. So if something is related to low level, I'm pretty sure I'm interested in this thing. So one of the major interests of mine has been kernel exploitation, which I covered last year during my talk at LeHack. So if you want to connect with me, hey, this is my Twitter handle at Pondred. So let's start. Right. So this is the today's agenda. Introduction to ARM. We will be discussing what ARM is, how it came to be. Then we will be discussing ARM versus Intel, how ARM compares to Intel, which one is better in which sense, or how they both compare to each other. Then we are going to discuss or review calling conventions from Intel, so as to understand how your approach changes when architecture changes. So when discussing calling conventions on ARM, we will be seeing some differences which are primarily due to hardware limitations. And based on those things, we will see how your payload delivery changes, how your exploitation mechanism changes. Then we, at the end of the, towards the end of the talk, we are going to discuss some exploit mitigations which are offered in Intel-based environments, as well as which are offered in ARM-based environments. So based on those things, we will be drawing a conclusion, and this is how we are going to proceed. The first question is, who is this talk for? So this talk is primarily for those expert developers or for those people who are looking to expand their skill set horizontally in ARM environment, as they're already working in Intel-based environments. So if you are an expert developer or an aspiring expert developer who is interested in learning ARM, or who is interested in learning a little more than Intel, but you are not a hardcore expert developer, or you are just a beginner, maybe 1 or 2 years of experience, maybe 3 years of experience, then this talk will suit you, as you will be able to correlate a few things which will make your journey a little bit easier into the world of ARM exploitation. So introduction to ARM. So ARM started as Acorn RISC machines in October 1983. They later changed their name to Advanced RISC Machines. However, ARM does not manufacture their own chips. So ARM, rather what it does is, it creates the architecture design as their intellectual property and then licenses it to other manufacturers so they can create their own hardware based on the architecture. It is optimized for low power and performance. Initially, it started as low end. It targeted low end computers and systems, but now it has been spread into pretty much all types of computing devices, whether they be microcontrollers, for which M series is known for, or more recently they have been expanding into the mobile the smartphone market, as well as with the introduction of Apple M1, they have now officially started competing in the desktop or laptop markets. Now, ARM also has a whole category of its microprocessor design, which is the R series, and the R series targets real-time operating systems. So, from real-time operating systems to microcontrollers to normal application-based microprocessors, ARM is really dominating in, or aspiring to dominate in, all these three uh, classes of devices, as well as currently the world's fastest supercomputer is ARM based. So ARM is really kind of winning the race here. Now, what happened is ARM actually initially started as a RISC model, but as more and more development started happening and they kept adding more and more instructions, it has now become kind of similar to a CISC model. However, ARM64 or R64, which is the 64-bit variant, is kind of turning the gears towards the RISC model once again. Now, ARM is a load store architecture, which means you cannot perform operations directly in memory. For example, you just cannot add a number to a memory location without first reading that memory, reading the contents of that memory location, loading it in a register, then performing the operations in that register, and then storing it back. So this whole process is known as a load store architecture, and it works much better in RISC-based systems, but when to the current size of ARM, as it has grown quite complex. Now this thing is a bit debatable, but still it offers quite a good perspective on architecture design. Now, ARM currently supports 4 types of execution modes. The AR64 is the 64-bit architecture design, which was initially revealed in 2011, and then which is later being used in a lot of smartphones these days. Almost around 40-50% of the smartphones today have been using the 64-bit ARM devices, and the demand is growing as smartphone manufacturers are competing for more and more specifications, more RAM, more storage, faster processor, and the newest function sets. ARM has been, the original 32-bit mode has been around for quite some time. And while ARM was a dominant factor, it also had a 16-bit thumb mode, which had a 2-byte size instruction set, whereas ARM is a 4-byte instruction set. Now, with the introduction of R64-bit, there is a new mode as well, which is thumb 2 mode. Along with all these things, supports conditional execution per instruction, which is not supported by Intel. It has an inline barrel shifter. Now, the need for a barrel shifter is because since the size of the instruction is fixed at 4 bytes, so let's talk about a 4-byte instruction set, fixed size instruction set. If you have an instruction which takes 4 bytes, how you cannot store a 4-byte number, or you cannot perform an operation on a 4-byte literal in the same instruction. You have to break things up, you have to move things around a little bit, maybe shift left, right, maybe do some other operations, maybe do operation on first half and then second half. So to facilitate all these things, it has an inline barrel shifter. ARM, since ARM started as a RISC-based architecture design, it has aligned memory access. And by aligned memory access, what we mean is every instruction is aligned at a 4-byte boundary or 2-byte boundary, depending upon which execution mode you are in. And it supports bi-endian data. So it supports little endian as well as it supports big endian. So with a little introduction to ARM, let's see how Intel and ARM compare. Now we are just taking a general Intel x86 architecture, which 64-bit added a few more things, but the basic remained pretty much the same thing. Since Intel 64-bit also has backward compatibility, so we are just comparing it with Intel x86. Now ARM is, as I told, ARM is a reduced instruction set computer, whereas Intel has been a complex instruction set computer. ARM is pretty inexpensive if you compare the execution and manufacturing cost as for the little devices, for example, smartphones or other things, whereas Intel is comparatively a bit expensive. Now, since ARM initially was targeted towards low consumption devices, its aim has always been to provide better throughput in low power, whereas Intel provides peak performance in high power as well. Therefore, Intel chips get heated really quickly and are not really that much effective or efficient for low power devices. Now, ARM does not manufacture its own chips, rather, as we discussed in the last slide, it outsources the production. It just licenses its architecture design. So manufacturers are free to use whatever material and whatever quality hardware they are able to or they are interested in. Whereas Intel manufactures its own chips. So it provides a stable or thorough design, whereas ARM's chips might not provide the same or similar experience, throughput, or performance, even if they are having the same architecture target profile. And as we discussed in the previous slide, ARM is a load store architecture, whereas Intel allows you to perform direct operations on memory. So, for example, let's suppose you have a variable int x equals to 15, right? So if you want to add 2, and if you want to execute the statement x equals to x plus 2, which will ultimately add 2 to x and store the value x. So at the end, by the end of the instruction execution, x will contain 70. Now in ARM, what you have to do is first you have to load the value stored in x into a register. You have to perform addition on the register, and then you have to store that value again back in the memory, which requires at least 3 instructions. Whereas in Intel, you can just do it with a single instruction. Just you can add using a memory operand. So sometimes it does feel like the ARM is a little bit too tiresome. Then a good feature of ARM is that it has fixed size instructions. It does not support variable size instructions, whereas Intel supports variable length instructions. So on a general ARM execution mode, each instruction is 4 bytes wide. In case of Intel, each instruction, an instruction can be either 1 byte, 2, 3, 4. It goes on till 15 bytes. So what it makes is it doesn't make the alignment a viable option for increased efficiency in execution. Now, since ARM has fixed size instructions, all the instructions must be aligned, whereas alignment is not an issue, and alignment is not really that much desired. It is desired, but it is not that good of an option when all your instructions are varying in length. Now, ARM has 16 registers where 13 are really general purpose registers. The two more registers are, you can consider them general purpose registers, but they do have some specific names. Whereas Intel x86, which is the 32-bit environment, has 8 general purpose registers. The 64-bit environment extends these general purpose registers to 16, essentially doubling them in their size as well as in number, which allows some very interesting efficiency changes. So with that covered, let's have a look at calling conventions. Now, a calling convention is a set of rules that is followed during function calls. So you have a function main, it calls, let's suppose, another function which is read password, and this function takes a few arguments. It might take the argument, for example, file. One of the arguments can be a file name. One might be the number of bytes to read, or the maximum number of bytes to read, and there can be many other things. So the calling conventions dictate how the parameters are going to be passed during in assembly language, as well as how the stack is going to be modified. Now, there are multiple calling conventions on Intel-based platforms. For example, it depends from operating system to operating system, as well as sometimes it depends on the library usage. So there's a standard calling convention, which is Microsoft calling convention. And there's one is 64-bit calling convention. As you can guess by the name, it applies on 64-bit Intel microprocessors. Then there's a CDECL calling conventions, initially and most commonly used by the C library. Now, because of limited registers, which primarily is the case for the x86 environment, because it only has 8 general purpose registers, arguments are generally passed via stack and they are pushed from right to left. So if you have 3 arguments, 1, 2, 3, 3 will be pushed first, then 2 will be pushed, then 1 will be pushed, and then the function will be called. Now, once the function has been called, what happens is, once the function has performed its task, the arguments are still on the stack. And since the arguments are still on the stack, they are need to be cleaned, right? The stack has been clobbered. So what CDECL does is, when you are using CDECL, which is by default the case with a majority of C libraries, the function which calls another function cleans up the stack. Whereas when using standard call, which is the Microsoft API calling convention, the callee, the function which has been called, cleans up the stack. So that is the major difference. Almost everything else remains the same. So you can see even on the same architecture, things can be a little bit different. And what's interesting is you can mix these two calling conventions in the same program. You can have different functions. One is using standard call, one is using CDECL, and it all works fine. Now, there are other calling conventions as well. Some of them are, for example, syscall calling convention, which is used when syscalls are being made. Fast call calling convention, as the name implies, was designed to speed up the process of function calling. It essentially loads first 3 arguments in registers, and the rest are put on the stack, and it is used primarily on 64-bit systems. Then there is this vector call calling convention, which it is generally used in games and other similar stuff on the Microsoft platform. Now, calling convention on ARM is interesting, primarily because ARM has lots of registers, right? So ARM 32-bit calling convention has 15 general purpose registers, where R15 is the program counter or the instruction pointer if you compare it with the Intel platform, and there are the rest 15 registers are from R0 to R14. So as the calling convention dictates, the procedure of calling a function is pretty much the same as in Intel. Program counter here, which is the PC or R15, which is EIP on 32-bit Intel, contains the address of next instruction which is going to get executed. Here R14 is used in a subroutine call, and it stores the return address in this register. R13 is similar to ESP, which is the stack pointer, which points to top of the stack. And the push pop instructions in thumb mode only use this register. Then R4 to R11 contains local variables for the function, whereas R0 to R3 are used to pass values to subroutine, which means that if your function has 4 parameters, then R0 will contain the first parameter, R1 will contain second parameter, R2 will contain third, and R3 will contain the fourth parameter, and then the call will be made. And the reason for this is they have the ARM architecture has a lot of registers, and some of these registers can be solely used for argument passing, which speeds up the process because the next function, the function being called, does not have to read the arguments from stack. So reading data from registers takes significantly less time than reading from memory. Now, as we move to 64-bit ARM platform, the registers double. So from 15 general purpose registers, now we have about 31 general purpose registers, and all the registers are 64-bit wide. Since the registers are 64-bit wide and we have 31 of these, we have a lot more to spare. So where in ARM 32-bit we were only providing arguments in first 4 registers, on 64-bit ARM we are using first 8 from X0 to X7 registers to pass values, whereas X0 will contain the result returned from the function or the calling. Now these are some there are some extra details on the slides which are sometimes not that clear. For example, some functions can use X9 to X15 and other registers, but these are not really that much advised. So the only thing to remember is X0 to X7 first 8 registers will be used to pass arguments to the function, and the return value will be saved in X0 when returning from the function. X31 is a stack pointer, which as compared to 64-bit Intel is RSP. Then FP is similar to RBP, which is the frame pointer. X19 to X29 are Coley saved registers. So it is kind of ambiguous what can be done and what should be done on these registers. X18 is a platform registers. It is used for some operating system specific purposes, or it is an additional caller saved register. Now, how these calling conventions change exploitation is, for example, you have to bypass DEP through RAD2 system. So on the Intel platform, on a 32-bit Intel platform, the arguments are passed via stack, and during a buffer overflow, you are controlling the contents of the stack. So you can directly control which function will be called and which argument will be passed through the stack only. Now, if we are on a 32-bit ARM platform, it is not the case. We can place the return address or the controlled program counter to any other function which we want to execute, usually the system function in the C library, but we will not be able to pass the contents directly from the stack, because the argument to system function, the first argument, the system function actually takes only one argument, which is the path of the command to execute, is going to be passed in R0 register. So you have no way where just by controlling the stack you can put a value in R0 register. Now this can be done, or this is actually done through return-oriented programming. So you search a few gadgets and the gadget loads a value from stack in R0 and then returns. So you can do that, but directly there is no method for that thing. It depends on other exploitation mechanisms, but primarily this is how these things work. Now for some introduction to some exploit mitigations in Intel-based environments. So a few of the most common mitigations. An exploit mitigation is a technique which mitigates the attempt to exploit a binary or a service or an application. So exploit mitigations do not necessarily invalidate the vulnerabilities. Rather, they make the exploitation very hard and force the attacker to think, is it worth the efforts when exploiting a vulnerability? If it is, then the attacker will definitely be able to exploit the binary, or will attempt to. If it is significantly harder and the output or the effort or the result of the effort is not as good, then the attacker will simply not bother attacking the application. So in these scenario, by having exploit mitigations in place, we can make exploitation less relevant, even if the vulnerability is still there. So some of the most common exploit mitigations include, now what we are doing here is, in this scenario we are discussing exploit mitigations from Windows as well as Linux systems. Now, one of the most common is stack cookies or canaries. So a stack cookie or a canary is a random 4-byte value which is placed just before the return address, so that if in case of buffer overflow the attacker tries to overwrite the return address, the cookie will come before the return address, and therefore the cookie will be modified as well. Before returning, there is a check which checks whether the value of cookie has been modified or not. One copy of the cookie is somewhere in global memory or in a register, depending upon the platform. But the thing is, it simply checks whether the cookie has been modified or not. If it has been modified, then directly or indirectly, stack buffer overflow has occurred. Since stack buffer overflow has occurred, there is no point in continuing the execution, as the attacker might have already controlled the execution path of the binary. So it terminates the program. Another one of the most common is DEP, which is data execution prevention, or NX, which is no execute. This mitigation simply checks the permission of the memory region and allows or disallows execution from those memory regions. For example, stack or heap do not have execution protections or execution permissions by default, and when an application is exploited, the data, the user input, either goes to stack or on the heap. So even if the stack pointer has been controlled or compromised, if the attacker tries to point the same stack program counter or the instruction pointer to shell code which is residing in stack or in the heap, the protection will terminate the program and raise an exception. ASLR is address space layout randomization. It by default basically randomizes the mappings of the several parts of binary. So where during one execution, the stack is mapped at one place, the stack might be mapped at another place during another execution. This does not allow attackers to use static addresses because mappings are changing every single time the application is terminated and run. But there are certain problems with this approach. For example, on Windows, certain libraries are always mapped. For example, kernel 32 is mapped, NTDL is always mapped, and a certain one or two depending upon the application and application type. And these DLLs or these libraries are remapped when the whole computer is restarted. So even if you restart the application, since other applications are also using the same libraries, kernel 32, NTDL, and a few others, these are static. So whereas this is not the case in Linux. In Linux, the libc, the glibc is always remapped. Now there's this relro, which is relocation read only. It is primarily used as a defense against format string attacks, as it resolves the symbols in a dynamically linked binary before execution and makes the GOT or the global offset table unwritable or readable only, so that even if someone is trying to rewrite a GOT entry and pointing that to their shellcode, then they won't be able to do it. Fortify source is another defense primarily supported by the GNU C compiler. SEHOP is a structured exception handler based protection mechanism, and therefore only supported on the Microsoft Windows. SafeSEH is another mitigation which is supported only on the Windows platform. ACG, CFG. ACG is abstract code guard and CFG is control flow guard. Along with these last four memory exploit mitigations are quite new to the scene and have been used only on Windows 10 and some high-end production softwares or corporate enterprise software such as Microsoft Office in browsers. Right, MEMG says used, as far as I'm aware, it is only used in Internet Explorer. Heap isolation is another technique which has been tried, which has been used or created to combat use after free bugs in browsers. So some of them are provided by the operating system. For example, DEP is provided by or supported by the hardware. ASLR is provided by operating system. Then Safe SEH, SEHOP, these things are a bit complex, right? As for the compiler, stack canaries cookies are provided by the compiler during compile time. Fortify source is provided by compiler. Relro is provided by linker. Then SEHOP is, I think, a compiler based protection. Then Safe SEH is actually a compiler based support. CFG is also a compiler based, if I'm not wrong. And then these are application specific. So even if having the same compiler, you won't really be able to, even using the same compiler, you won't be really be able to pass the same switches so as to use these protections on your custom applications. Now, as for exploit mitigations in ARM-based environments, now, ARM-based environments have very little exploit mitigations. So what you see on a standard Linux system, they have it all, but it also depends on which Linux operating system you are using. If it is very recent or frequently updating Android Linux system, then all these will be probably all these will be updated regularly. But a lot of environments, a lot of operating systems or execution environments do not update regularly. They are not connected to internet, or even if they are connected to internet, only the firmware is updated, which is not very regular, even in case of big vendors. So this makes ARM-based devices an easier target because even if the application or the operating system is providing, let's say, ASLR, but if that operating system was created 6 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when ASLR was in its primitive stage, there might be a few modules which were not supported and which might provide you a few good jump targets or static targets which are not randomized by the ASLR protection, and therefore you can use those as a gateway to kind of bypass or negate the ASLR. Right? In case of ARM, this is particularly true because ARM M-based series is a microcontroller-based series where they do not have full-fledged operating systems on the devices. Even in case of routers or something, you do not really need a fully updated Linux operating system. So you might have a very old version of GCC which might have been used to compile a few applications, and therefore there might be some exploit mitigations which are as good as not being there, right? So coupled with the fact that there are more ARM-based devices, the majority of what will probably never be updated It makes ARM a lucrative target. And this is why you should have a look at ARM-based devices while you are also learning the Intel-based exploitation. Thank you and have a good day.